Well, and there's something else. There's something deeper inside each of us. It used to be called the muse, right? There's something much deeper inside all of us, and it's an important thing to try to get in touch with that throughout your entire life. I've always thought of myself as a driver, as a driver in my car. My body is my car, and I'm separate from it. I'm the little guy driving that car.
You're listening to Creatives Prevail, unraveling the stories of creative professionals.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creatives Prevail. I'm your host, Mike Zimmerlich, and my next guest is Philip Slagter, a pioneer in pop surrealism with close to 1,000 pieces of artwork. In this interview, we discuss his decades-long career, including freelancing as an illustrator for major publications, becoming a full-time painter, and being commissioned to do work for Mandalay Bay, Luxor, and the Bellagio. We also get into how he's incorporating AI tools to promote his art. Let's get into it. Hey, Philip, how are you?
I'm fine, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. I was very excited when we got connected on telling your story because, wow, what story. I mean, the amount that you've experienced over the years is truly remarkable. And I did want to start off, though, in one of the things I really was inspired by you. I'm going to say inspired in this case, but like truly amazed is that you have been a professional artist for over 60 years now, I would say. And
6 decades.
Yeah, six decades, right? In visual art specifically. And I'll say even specifically going further in being a pioneer in pop surrealism. And
that's what I'm called. I didn't realize that then. There wasn't a thing called pop surrealism.
But now you became known for that. And you use AI for you to help promote your work. So the reason why I wanted to start that off is because, like, to be perfectly honest, like, you're the last person I would think of that would be embracing all this AI technology right now and be like, oh, it's going to destroy humanity. But you actually not only have been curious about it, but you have embraced it. You've been using it for a lot of your different endeavors.
I have. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've lived through so many different areas of communication over the last 79 years that this is just another one, and it's fascinating to me how technology has offered that to us. I think it seems to me that you say a few words or prompt a few words, click a button, and a mass human consciousness hallucination occurs. It's just fascinating to be able to see that. And me being a visual junkie, of course.
Right, because you've been using it on both fronts. You've been using it for prompts to help yourself out in figuring out how to market your artwork as far as what can be done today. And in addition to that, you've also been utilizing it for video generation that incorporates your artwork into the video.
Yeah, that's the fun part. The other part is it's a great brainstorming tool for me. And of course, I wouldn't use it just copy paste what it says to me. That's ridiculous. But it will open new doors or a little thinking process, and then you can run that, and follow that. I find it fascinating personally.
Now, you mentioned brainstorming. Is it mostly in brainstorming for marketing, or does it even help you with coming up with ideas on the artwork that you make? Or can you talk a little bit more?
I ask it everything.
Wow.
I've had deep philosophical conversations with it, which is philosophical. It's quantum. It's quite an amazing tool. It's just a tool. That's what people that get angry at it all the time don't seem to realize. They don't get angry at a hammer, do they?
Yeah.
A hammer, you can hurt someone or you can build a home, and that's all AI is, another tool.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with that. So we're going to rewind time here 60, 70 years ago when there was no, like, when AI was not even like very briefly being considered in science fiction. But your inspiration came from your grandfather, who I understand was also a painter as well.
Well, it came from both of my grandparents. One was a Sunday painter. He liked to paint wildlife, birds, and quail and pheasant and things like that. The other was rough and tumble kind of a guy who started an oil company in the late 40s before the war, and after the war continued and had quite a successful independent oil production company. So I traveled on yachts through the Bahamas and had quite a comfy life financially as a child. For instance, I've been on Paradise Island, which is in Bimini, of course, which is huge casinos and hotels, when there was one little fisherman's shack on the entire island and wild hogs running all over the place when I was 5 or 6 years old. It's fascinating. And now I haven't been down there in 30 years, but I can't imagine what it would look like now.
Wow. So was your family very supportive of you doing art? Because again, you started getting into painting at an early age. So were they nurturing that for yourself? Would you have to?
Well, my family is a very interesting area. They were. My mother was supportive. Pretty much everyone else thought it was a silly endeavor, but we were. Myself and my four siblings were always allowed to do whatever we wanted. So,
And was that true?
so I pursued. My grandfather, who you mentioned earlier, the Sunday painter, he would have been abhorred at the work I did.
Hmm.
He told me once. He said, "Those abstract painters, it's just disgusting, like Picasso and me."
But and did you like? Cause you weren't exposed to that at that time. It wasn't really until college that you were able to see that type of artwork.
That's true. And so when I started taking art classes at Indiana State University, I got exposed through art history classes too, and then I just ran with it. In fact, I still have this bizarre curiosity of a child. I still anything that pops up, I want to look at it. I want to explore it.
What did you find stood out for? I mean, obviously, abstract it in nature is going to be something that will stand out to you. But was there anything in particular that made you drawn towards that?
Well, pretty much all of it. Just the life stories too. I always like to read the life stories of the artists. But the work itself was just, I mean, it was fascinating. It was stuff I'd never seen. I just fascinated me. I don't know why I didn't choose to be a painter. That wasn't a choice of mine or an artist. It was just an obsession, something that I couldn't stop. Still can't stop.
And what did you major in college, by the way? Did you have a specific major?
I majored in commercial art, is what it was called back then, and things were a little not quite so specific and fragmented. It was commercial art. Encompassed all of it, and ceramics as a minor.
Mm. So you
And ceramics was a very important thing because it teaches you a three-dimensional structure. Because when you're pulling things on a wheel, they collapse if they're not structured perfectly and in balance. And that I just took that into my paintings and into my life. I had some
interesting.
kind of a structure.
It's really amazing, right? When you are experiencing different fields and different skills, how they can be combined and integrated with other things that you do in life.
Well, that's my definition of intelligence. It's not knowledge; it's the ability to put knowledge together and move it and understand and create new paths.
That's a very, very good point. So you went to college for commercial art, and then thereafter you did get a job in graphic design. So was that the pathway that you were expected to take at that point in time? Is that I'm going to, I love art. I want to make money from this. So I'm going to do commercial art and become a graphic designer.
That was as far as I was aware of it going at that time. We had a senior art show in college, and a man came to be a judge to the show, and a man named Russ Diana. He was a creative director of a major publishing company, and he liked my work, and I got a couple of awards, and he said to me before he left, he said, "If you ever want a job, come to New York City, Slater." And I said, "Whatever," you know. And then I went to Colorado first and spent 4 or 5 months in Denver. And then I thought, I think I'll go to New York. And I just got in my car and drove to New York City. I didn't call him or anything. I just found where he lived and went up to his beautiful high-rise apartment, knocked on the door, said, "I'm here for my job, right?"
That is probably the best job interview I've ever heard in my life. You just showed up out of nowhere, no call, no nothing, and just knocked on the door saying, "I'm here for my job."
Offered me a job. I believed him.
Did he actually give you the job?
He did give me the job, but
Wow.
of course it wasn't graphic design at first. It was paste up in mechanicals, and that's an ancient thing that no one in the computer age would understand. A book, excuse me, a book had to be sent. The type had to be sent to a typographer. Typographer would send it back in long rolls, like long rolls of toilet paper, and those had to all be cut apart and then waxed on the back of each one and laid down on a board so it was ready to be printed, and then cut every little typo out of it, everything that's a mistake. You had to cut it out with a little X-Acto knife and replace little things. And my desk was in the hallway because there wasn't enough room in the art department. Um, but that didn't last long. I was fortunate, and I worked hard, and within 2 or 3 months I was a graphic designer doing graphic design work.
Wow.
And then I ultimately became an art director of 2 divisions of the company.
Wow. So you went
Within
from graphic designer into art director. How long? I'm sorry. How long was that?
2 to 3 years, 2.5 years.
Wow.
Something. It just came natural. It was just, and I liked talking to people, and I had 7 artists working under me at that time. It was great. That's back when in studios and in agencies, people all were together physically. Now it's all, your agency can be scattered around the world now.
Yeah. It's very true. So it sounds like that this is something that you felt fulfilled in because you were around for a couple of years, and you had.
I did not feel fulfilled by
Really?
it. It was, it was, in fact, if I can do it quickly, I was in a big board meeting one day with, well, not board, but all the art directors and editors and a professor from the University of Michigan was there with a book he'd written, and they started talking to him about, that book's too long, it's too expensive to produce, and he said, well, this is everything in here, these 6 tests and all, it's important for the education, for the learning process. I don't want to cut it. And they said, well, you have to cut it. Here's the budget, and take 4 tests out, take 2 chapters out. And I stood up and walked out. I quit.
Wow.
Right there in that room. We were going to damage, in my opinion, we were going to damage young students and children by not offering them what this professor, who had far more knowledge of education and learning than anyone at that table.
Wow. Well,
it's kind of a harsh position, but I did, but whatever.
I mean, good for you for standing up for what you believed in, and that must have not been an easy decision to, especially how being at an art director level.
It was quite easy,
to just walk away from that.
Just walk away, stand up, get my stuff out of my desk, go home.
So what did you do after that then? I mean, did you go home and then go, okay, well, I need to find.
Became an illustrator, a freelance illustrator.
So you went into freelancing.
And that's, but just illustration, not graphic design. And that's an entirely strange world because back in those days, you walked around with a physical portfolio, and you would have X number of pieces of your work in it. And you would call art directors and make an appointment, and you show up with this big book of art, and they would hire you for jobs. I did things for the New York Times, for New York Magazine, things like that. I was an illustrator for all of that. Got an album cover once for the Rolling Stones, greatest hits. Just took off.
That's incredible. I mean, congratulations that you were able to going from this full-time job to now going off on your own to do freelancing and sustaining yourself in that particular way. I have to ask, did you find that fulfilling for yourself?
No.
No. I mean, most people are like, "What are you talking about?" No, you got featured in Rolling Stone and in New York Magazine, all these these iconic publications. So,
Well, the catch to that is you're as an illustrator back in those days, and probably now, they tell you what to paint. They tell you what to illustrate. Here's an article illustrated. Now, that's kind of open. Those were more fun. But often it would be, this is what we want, and here's a sketch of it or a storyboard for it. And so you're not doing your own work. You're creating. You're using yourself they are using you as a tool, as a brush or a pen, and so no, it wasn't fulfilling. And one day I just decided, 2 or 3 years of that, I just thought, okay, I'm going to northeastern Connecticut, out in the woods. And I found an old sea captain's home. It was Captain Billings, and wind would blow through the walls. I mean, it was out in the middle of nowhere. It was right next to a lake called Billings Lake, named after the sea captain. And I started painting.
wow.
And and never looked back.
Okay, so you went from full-time art director to freelance illustrator. Now you are completely dedicated yourself to your own original works, your own paintings.
Yeah, I made a conscious decision to do that.
So I'm sure a lot of us always want that. Like, that's the dream, right? It's like we want to be able to not only do our own original material, but also get paid and ideally make a living from this. So now,
Right.
mind you, this was, if I probably timelined here, pre-internet. So there was no, like, I'm not talking about social media here. I'm talking the internet itself didn't exist yet. So, and you're right now in the middle of nowhere, Connecticut. So how did you promote your work? How did you get your original artwork out there and for people to know what you're doing?
I showed it to people. That was, I had 4x5. I got an old press camera, a beautiful old camera, a Billows camera, one of those, and I took 4x5 inch slides of it, color and full on, and I would carry 20 or 30 of those with me. There's a funny story about that. I'm trying to remember the name of the artist. He's an artist in the 60s and 70s that did great big bulky human statues out of plaster. And I just can't remember his name at the moment, but he was quite famous, world famous artist. And I was invited to his, that's my telephone, excuse me.
It's okay.
And I was invited over to his studio with a friend of mine. They were purchasing a piece of work for New York, for the city. And I remember him asking me, well, what do you do? Right. And I thought, boy, that was a mistake opening that door. And I pulled out 40 slides, 40 of these big 4x5 slides. And he said something to me like, well, that took some guts or something. And I'm like, well, you asked me. Right. And I got a very good, very, very good encouragement from him. He said, I love what you're doing here, and you're very young, keep going. And that was quite nice.
So it seems like that from the start, you were just never afraid. You mentioned about yourself about not being afraid, always being curious, but also not being afraid to, to take the opportunities when they come. I mean, from when you got your job, straight out of, like when you went from Colorado to New York City, but then on top of that too, just whenever there's an opportunity to show what you can do, you took it every single time.
Every time, I still will. Their fear is not in a good position to come at anything from. And fear is really just imagination. Fear is an imagined future. That's all it is.
So the thing that I'm really curious about is that, okay, that you getting fellow artists and others to be aware of your work. Then the big question mark is going from that to now having patrons purchasing your artwork. How do you get there?
Now, oh, how did I get there?
Back then,
Well, it's
back
just a
then.
long.
Now it's a
Just,
very different story. We can certainly talk about that later. But I was curious back then, how did you make that leap?
well, like I said, just showed people, and same with galleries. With back in New York or wherever, you called a gallery and said, "Gee, I'd like to come show you my work," and they would say, "Okay," and make an appointment, and you'd bring in a few originals and slides. It was the same thing, and there weren't so many of us young artists out pounding the streets like that. So nowadays, I doubt you could do that without an introduction or something. But back then, we were a lot more rare than we are now. In fact, I watched that word artist, which is an interesting word. It used to apply to the visual arts, and then all of a sudden, I remember they were calling musicians artists.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, boy, there's a door they just opened on that one. They closed one on us visual artists, of course, and started it. So, but that's fine. There is certainly an art to writing music.
That's interesting. I never thought about that before, where the term music artist wasn't always considered that, and that it was mostly music was different, and then artist was specifically for the visual arts, and they started blending together. But I think, to me, that's what art is in many cases, is that it's adaptive in its own nature as far as the definition of what art is.
Right. That's a difficult area. The definition that's called labeling.
Mm.
And labeling is a difficult thing because once you accept a label, you've closed so many doors. It's like having a belief. If you have a solid belief about something, you've slammed doors on the universe. And that's, in my opinion, a mistake.
Interesting. So considering other mediums such as like photography and film and things like that, do you feel that labeling those as art as well
Absolutely
has constrained art?
I feel any truly creative endeavor is I would call art. I mean,
yeah,
creativity and art are synonymous in my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree. So you took were able to do your homework, finding out which galleries to reach out to, showcase your work, had them feature your work, and started now.
Well, I didn't have any one man shows, but I was in group shows and things like that.
So you were,
and mostly my work just sold through word of mouth and collectors like Caroline Newhouse, which was Condé Nast Publishing Company. Cy Newhouse was her husband.
Wow.
She bought a lot of my work back then. And she would tell people, and they would call me, and they would come to the studio, and that's pretty much been my entire career. I've only been represented by galleries on 2 or 3 occasions, and never really did well for me.
Interesting. So mostly was word of mouth, just keeping out there, and then more and more collectors became more aware of your work, and then started purchasing. You mentioned that about your entire collection was purchased at one point. So was there anything else that you were doing in the meantime, in addition to word of mouth?
In addition to what?
In addition to word of mouth?
No, there really wasn't much to do back then.
That's fair enough. So, what are things I love all forms of entertainment and also traveling as well. And one of the aspects that really popped out to me, of course, these are big names, especially for those who are ever visited Las Vegas. But you were commissioned to do work for a number of the resorts there, including Luxor, Mandalay Bay, the Bellagio, and I also you did the sky mural for the Venetian in the one that's in China, in Macau, China. How did that seems very different than your experience so far leading up to this point. Was that also word of mouth, or did that just come about?
That was after I came back from Thailand.
Okay.
And I had a 2-year-old daughter that came back, and my wife, and I met a man who had a studio making architectural pieces for Los Angeles, or I'm sorry, for Las Vegas. And he asked me, he said, "Can you carve?" I said, "I have no idea if I can carve. I did carve a rattlesnake handle on a wooden door once." And he said, "Why don't you come try?" And I did, and I produced a massive amount of work for like you said, the Bellagio, the Mandalay Bay, the Luxor. In fact, if you go to the Mandalay Bay, every column, every ceiling panel, everything I designed and carved personally. Um, and it just came. I don't know why it came to me. I remember when it hit me. What was happening was I was alone. The owner of the architectural design studio. He was rarely there. I was left alone constantly with a 6-pack of beer and some carving tools. And I was carving this 16 foot by 8 foot panel uh, is it called bas relief? I believe when it's Egyptian hieroglyphics that go in rather than come out, and I was just carving and carving and working, and just the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and it was strange, but I felt like I had done this a long time ago, right?
Wow.
That just was so natural to me that it was like I've somewhere maybe in some past life, if all of that's real.
I'm just thinking about the fact that they asked you have you carved before, and you're like, well, sort of, and they gave you this job anyway.
Well, he tried, he tested me to see if I could carve, and I remember the first thing I carved was I don't have a photo of it here, but it was not flat. It was like a flat, like the wrought iron work on the Bellagio when you drive in. That's all my carving,
Wow.
all of that, and it's stuff that intertwines, And my first test was to carve this big panel where pieces actually came out and wrapped around and went in behind each other and everything. And for some reason, it was quite easy. I don't know why.
So I mean, like that's the thing though, is that I mean that obviously doesn't happen every single day. I mean, there people that you know aspire and try so hard for that. I mean, I think it's one of those things where even though they came about in one way or another to you, I think that says a lot about you as both as a person as well as an artist, for them to have that much faith in you to do this type of work. I think that has to say something about you, including also those who have purchased your artwork over all these years.
Well, I don't know what it says, but but it's true. I was a cute young guy. Maybe that helps.
I mean, I've also looked at your artwork too, and I mean, it's truly remarkable. I think even I would say to this day, right? It comes down to the work. It speaks for itself, and I feel that is always has been true. Is that the artwork itself, however you're conveying yourself, that's going to be the true most representation of who you are as a person, right? And of course, behind the scenes, you want to be reliable and communicative, right? And all those other things that come along with it. But at the end of the day, the work has to be good. I mean, there's no other way around it, right? The work itself has to be good. It has to be something that is was considered of quality. But
it's easy to do, actually, Michael.
Really,
Easy. Yeah, you just have to learn to be honest with yourself. That's the most important part. If you're honest with yourself, it reflects in your art. You don't look at your art or your painting or your carving or whatever you're doing through someone else's eyes. You never do that. You never think, will they like it? Will someone? You never think that. And that's hard to get past when you're young, but it's doable.
I do. I know that there was you've had a number of hardships in your life, and I know that you've gone through a pretty serious tragedy a while ago, and that you lost you've been for all this time had this massive passion for painting and artwork, and then you lost it, and then of course you came back. and from that and keep.
I didn't lose my passion for art. It actually was one of the saving graces after my daughter passed. And it wasn't conscious. It was just remote,
Hmm.
like rote. It just was what I had done for 40 years or something, or 35, 40 years every day. I mean, I was one of those obsessed painters that you don't want to marry a man like me who's because it probably isn't going to last long. If you don't want someone who's in some room working 10, 15 or more hours a day. Um, so, well, where were we going with that?
I, it's like I can only imagine, what you were possibly feeling at that point in time, but you being on, as you mentioned, being on remote and so forth, and essentially stepping aside for a while. Like how were you able to overcome this and then come back to doing artwork again?
Well, I lost my daughter in an auto accident one morning. She was on her way to school in her car, senior in high school, and about 9 o'clock in the morning or something, four policemen came to the door, woke me up. My wife woke me up; she was awake, and said, "These policemen want to talk to you." And we'd been taking care of this young teenage boy who was having a lot of problems, Asperger's victim, and he. Um, and I said, "It's a little early to be here to talk about that boy, isn't it?" And the police said, "It's not about that. It's about your daughter. She's passed." And at that moment, I died. I mean, I died. I lost my soul. I lost all perception of beauty, all feeling. It was the strangest thing I've ever had. I've lived on feelings, and to be absolutely numb. And my wife too. My wife was a little better handling it, uh, but we both internalized it and didn't know how to share that. So that ended up stopping our marriage ultimately. That grief. Plus, I went into a 4 year period that I have no memory of, but I see 4 or 5 big paintings I did, but I have very little memory of actually making them or doing them. Um, and it took years to overcome that. I mean, those first 4 years, I was literally painting and drinking beer, just painting and drinking beer, and numb. I could walk outside and here in Montana and see a beautiful sunset and feel nothing. I could, the beautiful wind that used to blow in my face, I could blow in my face now and I felt nothing. Um, that lasted 4.5 years or something. Um, but that numbness continued on and on. And, but I learned how to live, how to come back to being a human. And, and it took a few, well, that's 4 years, so another 8 years of just existing, not really feeling. And then I came to an incredibly low period where my finances were completely gone, where the rent on the little house I had lived in became far too much that I could handle. And I was really at a low, a bottom that people talk about, thinking of actually taking my life. And and a friend of mine said, "Well, have you ever tried this particular thing called DMT?" And I said, "No, I have not. I've read about it, of course. I've read about all those fantastic trips people have made to the Graham Hancock and people have made to the jungle and had ayahuasca and the DMT ceremonies." I said, he said, "Why don't you try it?" And I did. It's only about a 30-minute experience, 20 to 30-minute experience. Um, and afterwards, I was like, well, that's fun. I saw the little people. They talked to me. At one point, the most important thing I remember of it was mostly silly, little silly people going and running around in colors and lights and things. And at one point, one of them said, "Do you want to live or die?" And very clearly to me, just, "Do you want to live or do you want to die?" And I said, "Well, I think I'll choose living." And And then when it wears off, there's no hangovers, nothing like that. You're instantly back to where you were before. So I didn't think anything of it. I thought, well, that was fun. Wasn't as much fun as LSD in the '60s, but but it was fun. And I went to bed. I woke up the next morning in the most absolute state of bliss that I have ever experienced in my entire life. I sat for 4 hours on my sofa, just smiling and brilliant, just and just feeling just love and peace. And that hasn't gone away. So, and the pain of my daughter when if I used to drive down the same road she had her accident on, I would cry, and that's gone. I feel no pain any longer. Her passing, I completely accept it. So it was quite an experience. I would never. I'm not recommending that drug to any other human on the face of this earth. Every person has to make their own decision in life. Um, but that's what it did for me. And most of the people I know that have done that's not what happens. They enjoy the visuals and have fun, and come back with great stories of places they've been. It's quite an interesting experience because I've had LSD experiences, of course, in the '60s, and LSD keeps you in this dimension and alters it. DMT removes you from this dimension, literally. You are no longer, things aren't, you're not hallucinating this dimension, you're in a new dimension. So, quite an interesting experience.
Wow. Thank you.
But it's medicine, and it needs to be remembered as that.
Thank you for sharing that story. I do want to talk about where you are now today, because you're still still making art, and I think how many paintings have you done now? I mean, it's definitely in the hundreds.
I'm close to 1,000 probably.
Wow.
I really don't. I don't really know. I last time I put them together, there was 350 or something, and that's in the mid '80s.
Wow.
So
So yeah,
I
probably
really don't have.
well, probably quite a bit from now. So still of course doing artwork. What else are you doing these days?
Pretty much just I'd like to figure out a way to make some money so that I can have a studio again. I'm really, what's the word, snapping at the bit. I really want to start painting again. I'm after I had to leave that apartment and where I live, there's nowhere to that's affordable for me. I'm currently living on Social Security, but a very close friend and his wife and son and took me in, and I get to live in their basement for now. And I'm trying to learn the social media, which is quite complex.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm about to open a campaign of crowdfunding. But that's also very complex. It's
It
not, you
is.
don't just make a little page and say, "Hey, help me here." It doesn't work like that. It's a whole marketing thing. Just like I opened a clothing line and of my art, of all 6 decades of art is on clothing now, and it's like opening a store on top of a mountaintop and expecting people to show up. You don't just open a store and put it on the internet. It's that's the same as putting in a closet. You have to market. You have to
Yep.
get people to come to your store. So I have a store in a bad location, basically.
True, but you have a store though. I mean, and that's the
I do.
right where
It's got 500. It's got over 500 products on it of basically shirts, swimsuits, hoodies, things like that. But it's got some pretty crazy art on it.
absolutely it's truly. I'll say again how remarkable the artwork is, and that's the thing though is that if you think about it, 20 even 30 years ago, that wasn't really possible unless you invested into the inventory and a
Right.
physical storefront and so forth, where these days it's all digital. It's just you click a not as easy as click a button, but basically as simple as you click a couple of buttons and now you have a full storefront. And now the challenge is not necessarily getting the store, it's how to promote the store. And I think it's flipped, right? Where, like you said, the location is, if you had a good location, or like you said before, where there were not that as many artists doing what you're doing at that time, if you were just doing the work, but you had to know how to do the work and had to be talented at it, and then get in front of the right people to be able to make a living from that. Now there are so many people that are able to do these skill sets because they have the tools and the resources available to them to do this. But now there's so many of us that are doing the same thing. Now the table has flipped, where now it's more of a question of, well, how do you make yourself go above the fold, right? How are you going to make your work specifically stand out when there's so much that's out there right now? And I think that's a wonderful, like, personally, I feel like that's a wonderful thing. I think that it levels the playing field, and that so many of us have the opportunity to doing these incredible things and not have to have a significant investment to be able to do them.
Well, it's quite a skill set, the marketing.
Yeah.
And I don't have that skill set. I mean, I literally the past 6 months or so, I've been studying it and reading everything I can and trying to learn about it. And even though I do these fun little videos and things that promote the store or just promote myself, they get very few views. You just, that's the entire process of how to manipulate or work an algorithm in social media is it's beyond me. I read it, I understand it, but it's a 24. I mean, it's basically 10, 12 hours a day process. Unless of course I was a very cute young lady in my 20s, then, or a young man in my 20s, I could step out in my bikini and have 1 million viewers. Bam, like that.
True, but if you're selling something, how many people are actually going to end up buying it, right? And I think that's a big part of it. And I want to say this first, is that I give you so much credit in the world that you took it upon yourself to, again, learn something that you were not familiar with. After all this time, that you are still, as you mentioned before, still curious and still trying to learn something that you admittedly yourself knew that you were not very, very proficient at. So first of all, kudos to you on that front. And second of all, I think that's the thing that we always escape our minds, is the fact that it's not necessarily how many people are seeing what you're doing, it's who's the ones that are seeing it, right? You said to yourself,
Right.
You're talking about those who are going to galleries, for example, to see your artwork. You're hitting exactly the right type of people that have the financial means to purchase your artwork, right? If you just had it,
Right.
on on a sidewalk or something like that, on a wall or something, like for sale sign, right? How many people would be able to afford that particular price tag? Even you get more people going by and seeing your artwork, but you're not getting the right people that's going to actually be able to not only A, appreciate it, but also B, have the means to purchase it. So I think that's the same thing true with social media. If you get like 5 people to see your video, but those 5 people are the ones that are interested in actually purchasing something from you, that's far better than 5,000 people that not a single person actually cares about it. They just are just being there because they want to be entertained.
Well, that's one of the things I haven't learned yet, and maybe won't, is that how to to find a niche like that, a niche audience, and get and actually acquire the emails and the contacts. And of course that's doable with money. That's I've talked to several agencies that I would instantly work with, but I just can't afford them. It's as simple as that.
True. I mean, obviously, Monday.
Factory.
Right. Funding definitely helps, right? I'm not, well, let's be honest here. Like, funding definitely helps in those situations when you can have the resources. But I would say those things are all amplifications, right? That amplifies what's already working for you. So if you are, it's interesting because you're at that stage where you clearly have showcased your work speaks for itself for so many decades. But then it's okay. How can that translate now to what was available today? And that's the translation part, right? That you're still working on. And I think that's the interesting part, right? Like you can, I've seen this so many times where you can also hire the best marketing agency in the world, but if they don't know what to do with your work, it's not going to matter at the end of the day anyway. Right. So it's about what ultimately is resonating with what people, like you said, that niche audience that you are essentially going to appreciate your work. And then 2, not only appreciate your work, but it's also going to purchase your work or support you in some form or fashion. What that audience is ultimately going to look like and where they are at. And then once you
I don't know.
right, but that's all point. But that's the whole point of learning. And also the important part is that you understanding of how this works is also so important too, because if you go into this and you, let's say, hire an agency or consulting firm, whatever the case is, and don't know, at least to some level, how the marketing end works, they could be blowing smoke up you. You have no idea, and you're just having full trust in
You
them.
can't imagine.
Oh, I
You
can.
can't imagine
Oh, I
how
can.
many. Well, you can't.
Oh, I can.
How many people have approached me, and you're the first honest person
Oh,
that
thank
has
you.
approached me
Thank
in
you.
any way whatsoever. I have the scammers, literally professional scam groups that work crowdfunding areas and work. They it's. I've gotten really good at vetting them. I could probably get a good job as a vetting scammer.
Like a crowdfunding auditor or something, like crowdfunding consulting auditor. Like something like that, right? Something like that. But you're right though, is that and that's the other thing too, is it's both of those things. It's not only making sure that you're hiring somebody that knows what they're doing, but also making sure they're not being taken advantage of. And that's a very fortunate
Right.
thing, but it is fact though. And I think there are many that will take advantage of creatives and and taking your money for things that that you gotta a can do yourself, or b that they're not actually professional in. So you gotta be really careful, like do your homework, do your due diligence. And I've a very, and believe me, I've been on both sides as a creator in this case of this podcast, for example, but also being
Yeah, we're having a
representation,
little
doing
difficulty
crowdfunding
here with our
consulting work, but
connection,
also
I think.
representing music artists for quite some time. The thing is that you really want to make sure that there's that level of trust. You want to do your homework. I always encourage anybody that I'm representing to give them some sort of education on the process, because that's important to me, is that they learn, like at least at a surface level, what's going on, because I want to make sure that they understand the decisions that I'm making, or how what I'm what I'm doing to support, how I'm supporting them, because that's important for them to understand that part of the process. So
No, that part I have grasped, and
good.
I'm just from the research and work that I've done. I like an agency. I believe I'll be able to tell if they're capable of or going in the right direction. And, we did work with an agency once from India, which was a big mistake, and spent and wasted a lot of money. They just naively didn't realize that how could a team of 4 or 5 young people in the mountains in northern India have any idea of American pop culture? Any? None. They had none. And consequently, it didn't do a thing. Didn't attract one customer. Didn't attract any followers. But that was a good learning experience.
That's exactly right.
What
It's a
we do.
learning experience. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, so we can start wrapping things up here. I do have a couple of fun questions for you to finish this out. So the first question I have for you is something that I was thinking about, something that was related to pop surrealism and fine art. Do you have a favorite museum that you like to visit?
Well, never been asked that. Of course, the Metropolitan in New York was the Museum of Natural History was just is a fascinating museum. The Metropolitan Museum is amazing to look at the antiquities. And I mean, that's what was immensely important in my life. It shows you culture, and how is culture defined? It's defined by the arts, by the sculpture, the visual arts of every ancient culture and even contemporary culture. Um, so when you start to look at a beautiful carving or a side of a temple or something, my curiosity then is who in the world were the people that made this and why and whoa. And so that just started me down pathways of diving into various cultures, which is what made me start to want to travel. I wanted to experience those cultures. Is it real? Is it just what I'm seeing in books, or is it really there? and and so I traveled most in developing nations. I spent a couple of days in Paris, and it was like spending a couple of days in New York. It was in Western, still Western culture, and I wanted to be outside of, completely outside of my comfort zone. I flew to Thailand alone. Um, didn't speak one word of Thai. In fact, I was on my
Wow.
way to Bali actually, and the plane landed to take on passengers in Bangkok. And the man sitting next to me said, "You ever seen Bangkok?" I said, "No." And he said, "I'll show you Bangkok tonight if you want to catch another flight tomorrow."
Wow.
And I said, "Sure, sounds fun." And we got off the plane, and 5 years later, I left Thailand.
Wow. That's incredible. Uh,
Never made it to Bali. I have been, of course, but I didn't get to Bali. But I've been on Java a bit.
that's incredible. Do you? So we talk about a number of aspects of fine art specifically, but I'm just curious because you also came from commercial art too. So outside of fine art, is there any commercial artwork, I'll say like pop culture of any kind, that you consider that you are impressed by? Is there any artwork in like more of the commercial art field that you've been impressed?
There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it that impresses me. What impresses me the most is, like I said, if it's commercial work or if it's done for someone else, that doesn't impress me. But the craftsmanship that I see in young people in today's world staggers me. I mean, there are some, and of course, in the arts, there are some, not just the craftsmanship, but the beautiful minds, beautiful ability to express themselves rather than express a group idea or somebody else's idea. And those are honest people with themselves. They're being honest with themselves. If you can't express well, and there's something else. There's something deeper inside each of us. It used to be called the muse, right? There's something much deeper inside all of us, and it's an important thing to try to get in touch with that throughout your entire life. And it's a very calming, quiet spot, but it's very, in my opinion, it's very real. We're not just flesh and bone. We're. I've always looked at myself, even when I was young and had no understanding of any of this. I've always thought of myself as a driver, as a driver in my car. My body is my car, and I'm separate from it. I'm the little guy driving that car.
So, last question for you. You've given so much incredible advice throughout this entire interview, but if you were only able to give one piece of advice to somebody else, what would that one piece of advice be?
Be honest. That's the bottom line. The honesty is, and I'm not talking about little white lies like, gee, can you come to dinner tonight? No, I can't. I haven't. And you just want to stay home. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about real deep honesty with yourself. Um, to not be frightened of that, not be frightened of yourself. That's very important advice, I would think. Advice in the arts would be the same thing, because if you can get in touch with yourself, you can express it. If you can't get in touch with yourself, you're not going to express it. It's just, you're going to just be mimicking other work, other people's work, other movements in art, and that's fine if when you're starting out. I think that mimicry is important. It's a lesson in learning, but you need to apply that lesson on a deeper level than just technical ability.
Wow, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's. I like to say in this case, it's something that's simple but really hard to do. Is to be honest with yourself and to be honest in the work that you do. And at the end of the day, you have to live with what you have to live with yourself and be proud of the work that you do. And I think that by far is more important than anything else. So I completely agree with you.
You say it's difficult, and it is at first. It gets really easy once it gets rolling.
Yeah. I would say, I think that definitely comes with an experience. I will say that comes up from experience too, that being honest with yourself, but then also knowing who you are as a person, which only comes from time. That only comes from life experience.
Yeah, I would agree.
Well, thank you.
And I've had a lot of time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, Philip, for being on the show. I really do appreciate it, and of course we'll make sure that everything's in the show notes for people to check out your work and so forth. But again, it's truly an honor to have you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. It's a very honor to meet you. Like I said, one of the first truly honest person I've met in this entire ending endeavor.
I really appreciate
So
that.
thank you very much and this opportunity too.